When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Fearless Mindset Podcast. And I took a little bit of a break. What I usually do in my podcast, I load up my guests in a week. I probably do 8 guests in a week, and that's enough in my library the last 2 to 3 months. And many of you have been asking, hey, when's the next guest popping up? Well, we've been doing 2 a week. So we got a brand new guest. No one's seen him on our show, but this guy is a legend in the security industry. He founder of Emergence, a Marine Corps veteran, and thought leader down in Southern California. And we have Yousef Badou, right? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Badou, yep.
Badou. And people that follow Byron Rogers know Yousef very well. And he's been a keynote speaker on many conferences. He's works with a lot of corporations. And we finally figured out a time and day that works. We've been going back and forth for a few months. But welcome to the show. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Mark, really appreciate you having me on. Great show you got here.
Yeah, appreciate that. You know, it's all about, just trying to inspire our veterans, our military folks and our law enforcement that feel kind of cast out of society with the defunding police. And the whole goal of the podcast is to, educate these young generation folks that want to get in, let's say, threat analysis, behavior analysis, like what you do, or get in the executive protection industry, like so many of our colleagues are, and provide that inspiration and hope that there is life after the military. There is life after college education. You get a degree and they go, what is this piece of paper really worth now?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially nowadays, it seems, being a protector is kind of a dirty word. We're kind of getting hit on all sides, whether it be law enforcement and military. You see military recruiting down, but, there absolutely is hope. And I think, where you're always going to have ups and downs, those people out there with that protector DNA, as Byron likes to call it, it's built into their system. It doesn't really matter what the opinion is. They're out there to protect people. And there is absolutely a very welcoming world out there. And shows like yours, Mark, are really what, it's been a complete generational change. You saw what happened to Vietnam veterans when they came back and other kind of foreign wars. They just kind of went internal. But now you have these massive platforms really educating people and letting our voices be heard, whether law enforcement, military, or executive protection. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. So, you're doing God's work, my friend.
Thanks for the compliment. I laughingly go back in my mind on my first 10 episodes. And I can remember sweating profusely when I had Michael Trott on the show. I was just sweating. I was in the studio there in Orange County. I was just sweating. I'm like, what is my deal? And it just looking at that camera, just getting over our own insecurities. And, I was challenged during the pandemic to do something because nothing else is going on. Like, shoot, what do I do? No one's working. And so I think if I can be an inspiration to some other folks that, hey, just pivot. Overcome and adapt, that's life.
Exactly. And reinvent yourself. Never be scared to reinvent yourself. I've done it a couple times. I will probably continue to do it. And actually, I'm doing it with the business and myself right now. Once you get over that fear of reinventing yourself, because that's to push off onto those shores is kind of being scary, especially after having a structured life so far. But once you do it a couple times, you get over the pain. You're like, this is not that hard. And it opens up so many more opportunities for you.
When you say you're reinventing yourself, what projects do you have you're working on right now? Because we know you probably have, 3 different businesses you're working on, many projects?
So normally I'm, dealing with corporations. I've been training military and law enforcement for years now. That's kind of my bread and butter. And that's where I always felt good, where the audience really received it. But, not to go down too far down a rabbit hole, Mark, but right now I'm focusing on our kids, and especially college age, young adults, because they're in a mess of hurt out there. There are so many threat vectors out there for our young generation. And I know the older generation's like, oh, back in my day. Well, today, today, those kids are dealing with so many threats from so many different avenues, whether it be social media, online, physical, mental, ideas put in their head, whatever it is. I really want to focus on that. I've been training, like I said, military and law enforcement, but in the security realm, yes, situational awareness, the threat detection that I teach is important, but at least in the military and law enforcement, you're starting with something. You've been on the job, you've been through situations, you understand life and death decision making. So you might not have this training specifically, but at least you kind of get it. Whereas our kids are heading off to colleges, whether they be out of state, we're letting them out into the world with zero street smarts. And we could be that generation that, points at them. You talk about Gen whatever, they don't do this, they don't socialize. Well, whose fault is that? If they're not out there, they're not prepared for the world. The Marine Corps taught me real well, hey, that's a leadership problem. So that's where I'm trying to focus kind of my training nowadays.
That's amazing. You know what I'm hearing at the church I go to, there's so many teenagers committing suicide just in Southern Oregon. Mm-hmm. And I pop into church, and then the pastor brings up the fact that, hey, so-and-so just committed suicide. I would say probably one every couple months up here.
Wow.
Teenagers, depression, bullying going on social media. And if that's Southern Oregon, that's probably happening nationwide, and we're just not hearing about the cases. It's just, there's so much pressure from Instagram and from TikTok to be that influencer. And if they don't have someone like a post, they just freak out. It's like, really?
Yeah, we got to build in some resilience there. If we're the resilient ones, if we're the tough ones that had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow barefoot, then we're doing a piss poor job of passing that grit onto them. So what can we do? Can we give them a little bit of street smarts before they head out the door? Are they going to be, PhDs? Are they going to be as smart as a cop? No, but you can start from somewhere. You can teach them something. You build in some resilience and the grit, because there's kids out there doing that. There are, for as many kids that are having problems dealing with a suicide, there are kids that are building grit, typically in places like Montana and Utah, up in the mountains and whatnot. So can we take a little bit of what's in the water up there and spread that around? You mentioned Orange County. I've lived in Orange County here for now 20 years in California. And, you had a small, sleepy surfer town in San Clemente. And, San Clemente High School had this huge heroin problem. Heroin. Mark, of all places in Orange County, but you see things like that cropping up a lot more lately.
Now, what do you see in your research as you create curriculum? What if we had teenagers listening to this podcast, for example, what is your message to them about getting stuck in the social media spin cycle, the watch machine? What is your advice to them?
Yeah. So when it comes to social media, it's like that's none of that's real. It's all fake and it's all polished. And you're actually seeing amongst social media things, and, not to get off on track, you're actually seeing a dip of this because a lot of people are starting to realize. But when you're at that adolescent age, you don't really understand what life is. You think everyone's just having millionaire yacht parties all the time, but no one's on Facebook or Instagram posting about when they can't pay the rent or when they can't get fired, Right. So it's like all those things happen in a person's life. So just understand those are all manicured. It's fake. It's not a real life. It's a good source for entertainment and communication, but it's not real world. So definitely don't attach your self-worth to some of these social media platforms.
And not everybody's going to be a Kardashian family. They have people they pay hundreds of thousands a year to manage their accounts and to post it to make it all pretty, and that's all they do. And, I use Instagram for my podcast and for my level security group. And I really don't care how many followers I have. I know some guys are like, oh, you got to get your followership. That way you get other offerings. I'm like, that's not my goal. That's not my mission. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think, like you said, so many people are misinformed of what the purpose really is for social media. And like you said, everybody, the top 1% has that lifestyle. But the rest 98% of the world, they don't. They work for a living. They have to work at a day job, and not everybody can be an influencer. And I think you're right. Everybody's so hung up on YouTube influencers and all these big social media influencers. If I can just hit one posts go viral, I'll make, 10,000 or 100,000 a year, but that's just not reality that most people
not at all. They're built around, if you've seen any gaming theory that casinos use in slot machines, it's a certain amount of spins, a certain amount of clicks. And right when you're about to click, right when you're about to walk away and go, I'm not winning anything, boom, they give you a little dopamine hit. And then, hey, that resets your dopamine. You go, okay, maybe I can win. It's same with social media. They have those algorithms that develop that. So my best advice, when it comes to, a little off topic, but when it comes to adolescents, when it comes to adults in general, think of it like this. We had a version of this when we teach man tracking. And if you get on a social media platform like Instagram or whatever you're on, and you're feeling worse and worse and worse every time you get on, you feel bad when you walk away, that's something you might want to cut out of your life, as opposed to being entertained or having a laugh, everything in moderation. But that's kind of a thing, we used to use a version of that in tracking, which is kind of funny, but you can apply it to everyday life. If you're feeling worse, probably time to back off.
Great point. I've never thought about that. Mm-hmm. There for a while, I was trying to do all my social media stuff for myself or my business. And I was just finding myself spending 30, 40 hours a week doing this. I'm like, I'm not enjoying this. This is not fun.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to freaking delegate it and have someone hire someone to just manage it myself. And now I'm freed up to do other things in my business. And, but I noticed that dopamine hit was hitting me. I get stressed. I started getting anxiety. I'm like, this is stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And when it comes to the business side, likes don't pay the bills. Likes don't pay the bills. And they help. There's a reason for it, and they're definitely something you don't want to not do at all. But likes don't pay the bills.
I like that theory. I like the concept. Well, we'll move on. You have a lot other things going on. You've been in the behavior science sector of the industry for a long time, and what is your thoughts on coming out of pandemic? Are people actually starting to act out? That's why we're seeing all these shootings. Everything's built up. Everybody's been in a pressure cooker. Now they're starting to pop. Is that kind of what your theory is on all this?
Yeah, I'm no global expert on it, but if I had to put a name to it, we were still dealing with the follow. You saw the things happening towards the end of the pandemic, and I think this is just bleed over. Now you're adding different economical things that are happening right now. People are getting laid off, even though the job market's still pretty good. There's indicators on the horizon that things might not be so good right now. So you mix in liberal policies with some municipalities. Here in California, we're dealing with basically as long as it's, I think, under $950, it's a ticket,
Right.
So you're seeing these rashes of just people walking into malls and Walgreens and robbing everyone because they can. They've basically been given permission by that municipality. So I think it's a perfect storm of everything. You have political polarization. It's basically split right down the middle. I don't want to get into the political side, but It's split right down the middle. And you see a lot of people that can't have any common ground anymore. When it comes to the younger generation, that's what I do worry about is you can't, they have a lower tolerance for debate. If an opinion doesn't agree with them, they just start yelling and screaming. And it's not only young kids, it's adults too, but you're seeing a lot more prevalence of that, and if you're a, student of history and you look at some of the things that happened during the end times in Rome, I don't want to be Chicken Little here, America's a very strong country, we'll get past this, no problem, but there are similarities. So I think you tie all of that together and you have a perfect storm for people committing crimes, acting out, and, seeing violence uptick.
I think the worst is yet to come. I mean, I think my theory, I'm not an expert either, but based on people I've talked to, I look at the banking crisis. Who would have thought? I mean, Silicon Valley Security Group, Silicon Valley Bank, not Security Group. Sorry, guys, I'm a member of that. So a little Freudian slip on my part. The Silicon Valley Bank just went under, and they're probably one of the biggest VC firm lenders out there. They just, they probably had trillions of dollars in that thing, and they just went bankrupt. And it's like, oh shoot. And I talked to some people down in a contact of mine down in Southern California with a certain bank. I'm not going to mention the bank of the name. He told me this information in privacy, but they almost went under. I'm like, really? And I think with the thing going on with the interest rates and the bond issues going on right now, it's looking pretty scary for the financial world.
The regional banks are getting hit real hard right now, and hopefully they can slow the roll on that. And for now, it appears that's been slowing. But when SVB went down, the regional banks really got hit. And, another factor to talk about, again, we're just kind of talking about whatever right now. But, I've heard from some insurance companies that I've done some work with and talked to, cybersecurity is so bad right now because they're getting so hard and they're liable for so many things like ransomwares and whatnot, that there are major insurance companies, I won't say their name, but you know who they are coming down to organizations going, you know what? We are not insuring cybersecurity threats anymore. Figure it out, knock yourself out, but we will not insure you. And it's like, that's an even underlying scarier thought when it comes to that.
That's a great point you mentioned, because I know, I can't name names in a public setting like this, but I know of a few security companies that are big players had their insurance companies fold and go under that provided them workers' comp and general liability insurance. I'm not going to say the names because that's private information, but I have to say, my red flag went up, like, what the heck is going on the banking side that they're not getting back banking? I mean, how does that insurance world work? I don't know the background and the underlying variables of what makes an insurance company go fold. Do you have any concept on that stuff?
Not really. No, that's not really my realm, but I got to assume it's maybe, for insurance, maybe you've paid out too many policies, maybe it's cost too much money. Maybe for the cyber threat, from what I've heard is, they're backing away because it's untenable. The model doesn't work. The math doesn't check out because they're taking so many hits. So you take enough of those hits, even the big ones fall, and that has secondary and tertiary effects. You have a security company that can't get insured. Now you have someone, maybe the state law says you have to be bonded and secure, insured. And now you have, a complete vacuum or a lack of security. That's no bueno.
That's bad news. But yeah, if that's an indicator, if a security company can't get workers' comp and general liability insurance, and then they can't be in business, no one's going to do business with them. So if that's happening in the security industry, I wonder how many other industries that's affecting too. I'm like, times are getting a little weird on us.
Yeah, getting a little tough. It's a little bit of a cascade, but America, we're a tough country. We'll get through this, no problem. Well, it'll be some tough times, but tough times breed tough people.
Yep, I'd agree. Yeah, we've always been a resilient country. We've always got through some tough, in the Depression, we survived that. But here's the big topic of the current day is Ukraine. What are your thoughts on what's going on over there with the whole geopolitical thing? Have you been tracking that at all?
Oh, I've been tracking it. Again, I'm no geopolitical expert, but just doing my own research and making my own observations as, Russia's really getting hammered over there. They're sinking a lot of their treasure chest into that Ukraine. I don't know why they're doing it. If it's an ego thing, if they want to puff their chest out and show that they can take Ukraine, but they're dumping everything. I mean, if you look at the weapon systems on the ground, where Ukraine is getting every piece of high-speed gear we've developed in the past 10 years, I see it, not to get conspiracy theory, but I see it as a testing ground for a lot of the people developing these weapon systems. They said, hand it over to them. Let's see what kind of, effects we can have. And then you look at the other side where Russia is busting out old, T-62 tanks from mothballs and trying to send them to the front, and it's not working. So that's a big clash there. You're seeing Russia really kind of fall off their pedestal of strength. You're seeing, the Russia get with the BRIC companies, China, India, and so on and so forth. And, I don't think that's coming from a position of power. I think they're going to them because they're going to need the help. And, so a lot of geopolitical happenings going on. Meanwhile, we got our own problems here in our own country, and we're knocking off $30 billion, how many billion dollars it is, into other sides. I'm not saying Ukraine is not worth fighting. I'm not saying those people need help. Russia's doing a lot of bad stuff on the ground. But, as a Marine who deployed multiple times, we just came out of 20 some odd years on two different fronts. Right. That cost our blood, that cost our treasure and coin. What are we doing here? Maybe we need to focus up and get a little bit more, focused with where we're deploying our resources. So that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, my biggest problem in agreement with you is we're spending a lot of money of our tax dollars financing that. And my question is, well, how much of these United Nations countries are actually adding to that check? Are we getting compensated by other European countries? So why, we're always footing the bill for Iraq. We're always footing the bill for Iran. It's like, or not Iran, but Afghanistan. It's just like, what the heck? What's going on? And being a business owner like yourself, I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of paying everybody's war. I'm tired of paying the check for everybody's war. I'm like, I'm a capitalist. I run a business, and I sometimes question, the leadership in our country. Do they really know what they're doing? And the Pentagon, I'm like, what theory are they listening to? What are they talking about? I listened to the Eric Prince's show with Sean Ryan.
Oh yeah, good one. Yeah,
first podcast I've listened to for 2 hours. I'm like, my God,
all the way through. Yeah,
I listened to the whole thing. I'm like, it just flipped a light switch in my head. Going, it just really repositioned my thought process on how the Pentagon brass really think in doing warfare. And what is their strategy? What is their ideology? And Eric Prince really took a deep dive in that. You have to listen to that to kind of get an understanding of what we're referring to. But it made me question a lot of things, especially in our government.
We don't really do, long-term planning. You look at China and their Belt and Road Initiative, they get on board with each other, whether it's by, coercion or force or whatever it is, but they'll get on the road with each other, and they'll build out a plan for the next 50 years, next 60 years. And you'll see that in the Belt and Road Initiative, where we just kind of go from administration to administration.
Yep.
And I just read General Mattis's book, and it's a really good book. If your listeners want to, check out another kind of frame of that and how he's come up through the Desert Storm and so on. It changes with each administration. You have, egos, you have, different things happening. And, what have we done in Afghanistan? We've spent a lot of our relationship currency with a lot of these countries. There's a quote going around right now, and it's like, hey, why are all these people teaming up with China? Why are they devaluing the dollar? Why are they going to China? And I think this came from an African country. It's like, because when we call America nowadays, we get a lecture. When we call China, we get an airport. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think these countries are going to do? So I think we need a lot more long-term planning. Some think tanks or big brains out there, much smarter than I am, need to look at something and go, hey, this is the way ahead for the next 15 years, the next 20 years, And
I heard part of that. I listened to some podcasts with David McGregor and Lieutenant Colonel McGregor, I think it is. And he was telling in a podcast with somebody that the end goal with Russia and China is actually trying to build a railroad system through the Ukraine up to Russia for transportation. I'm like, that makes sense. Okay. Yep. Again, China playing the long game. And we're so, in our culture in America, we're so focused on, like you said, election cycles, midterms, presidential. And then each different administration has different values and they change what they do. We're so short term in our forward thinking and progress as far as, national security. We get so short sighted in our election system, and, like China and Russia, they're all playing the long game. And so I would agree with you on that one for sure.
There's a book. I wish I could remember the name of it. I used to have it up here on my show, but if we want to go down that rabbit hole and your listeners want to, I'll try to remember and I'll send it to you. Maybe you can link it there. You can get it on Amazon, but it was, early in the 1990s, these two Chinese majors wrote a book basically. Because of the Gulf War, you had China, building up their military. We had us building up our military, but the Desert Storm, where I'm Kuwaiti, so I was there on the ground when that happened. Yep. When that happened, that was the kind of first, time the world got to see some of the American might, our JDAMs and our targeted bombings and our equipment and so on and so forth. They call it like the 90-hour war because we just obliterated everything in our path. And these two Chinese majors were watching this on TV, and they said, there is no way we can fight this might. There is no way, even with what we have here in China, even though we got 10 million people and whatnot, we cannot fight that type of position. They figured that out in 1990. So from that, they said, all right, how are we going to fight this? And if you look at, Chinese diplomacy and how they do the globe, how they position themselves globally, if you had a list of like 1 through 7 things of how you, attack someone, force, kinetic force, using the military, dropping bombs is the last thing they ever want to do. They have a whole list of other things. And the main one is economic, so they'll go and they'll build the airports. They'll go and they'll do the diplomacy. They'll push people, they'll fly jets towards you and they'll get you to shoot down the jet, and now it's a big, egg on your face moment in the global kind of diplomacy. So, it's scary to read this book. It's not I'll definitely find the link for you, but you're reading it and you're kind of getting, whoa, okay, yeah, we're spending all this money on weapon systems and that's good. We want to protect ourselves, but we don't have a 1 through 6 plan before we get to that. It's, either come on board or we're going to hammer you, That's worrying sometimes.
Because their warfare strategy is completely opposite our warfare strategy.
I wouldn't say yeah, basically, in the grand scheme of things, again, the last thing they want to do is get in a kinetic shoot 'em up warfare. You're seeing, look at Taiwan right now. You're seeing the president or whatever, the grand poobah of China tell the Biden administration, like, look, I don't want to do this, but I'm not going to be the Chinese president that loses Taiwan. So don't push me on this. And it's like, oof, that's a strong stance there. What are we going to do with that? And
I think our adversaries know they have a short window to do something of action before we have their next presidential election. Right now is their time to trump. Their time to move. I mean, example, we saw the balloon go across the United States airspace.
Yep.
Perfect example. Because our enemies know they have a limited time space to make a move before the next election cycle in the U.S. So I predict that we have another year and a half, and before the presidential election happens again, and all the bad guys, our enemies, they're gonna be doing all kinds of tricks, and the balloons are just the start.
It's pushing and probing and checking and seeing where we can get by.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not getting into the politics about the former president, but a lot of people didn't want to mess with him because he was a wild card. They had no idea what he was going to do, but then you see the balloon fly over the entire, United States. And then now we've confirmed that they were taking SIGINT information. They were taking pictures of sensitive locations. Big surprise. Never saw that coming. I thought they were just trying to check out Disneyland. That's a push. That's a probe. And they're gaining information, I'm saying not just the signal intelligence, but on what we're doing on the world stage there. So that's alarming, to say the least.
Well, hey, share with the audience. I mean, you got a lot of other projects going on. You got Divergent. You started that. And what's going on in the corporate world? You're being sought after as a subject matter expert in behavior sciences and stuff. And what is the big ask of companies for you and what you offer? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, sure. It really depends. So specifically on the corporate security side, I've been brought in to train the corporate security staff, people who might go be around the C-suite a lot, people who travel with them, their security teams, some of their staff members, even some estate staff, depending on who you're talking to. But on the worker side too, there is, workplace violence happening all the time, and it's, not a lot of good stuff. So I came up in the Combat Hunter program, the United States Marine Corps Combat Hunter program, where the God we pray to is what we call left of bang, looking left of bang, looking for pre-event indicators of violence or threats. And if you have that mindset, you can kind of pick it apart before the violence happens. So if that's training a corporate security team, it's like, hey, how do we scan a crowd and look for that one person in the crowd who's not acting like everybody else? It might not be a necessarily overt threat like they're about to pull a gun, but there's certain behaviors, baseline behaviors that we want to see. So we could use that. On the workplace violence side, same thing. Is someone about to pop off? Is someone getting violent all the time? You see some research that'll tell you everyone, looks at the quiet guy at work, right? The quiet guy who keeps to himself, and they're like, oh, that guy's he's gonna pop off one of these days. Something bad's gonna happen. Well, you look at some of the research and some of the instances, a lot of the times it's not the quiet guy, it's the person who's always popping off, who's always getting mad, who's always getting that kind of rage cycle. And what you see is, if someone's always getting mad, punching things, hitting things, That's somebody who can't regulate their anger, has a problem regulating their anger. So if they feel ashamed or if they feel hurt by something, that's what you want to pay attention to. So things like that, all the way to the gamut. So that's looking at the violence and threat side, but also, going to your place of business and establishing behavioral baselines on people and knowing that, Sharon's behavior is she's always loud. She's always making a joke. You can hear her down the way. You can hear her in her office all the time laughing, and understanding when she deviates from that baseline behavior. And all of a sudden I walk in one day and I can't hear Sharon. I don't know what's going on. I walk in and she's hunched over in her desk, pulling herself in. Is that a point for me as a leader or a coworker to tap Sharon on the shoulder and go, hey, Sharon, what's going on today? And she goes, you know what? A, B, and C happened. A, B, and C happened. And you can disrupt maybe a potential violent event, or maybe you're just being a good person, helping out that culture. So it really runs the gamut with, what I'm doing with people out there.